The ever-so-elusive idea of the Montreal Canadiens trading away a top draft pick. In fact, we're talking about a 5th overall draft pick in this commentary today, and no, it's not Ivan Demidov. That guy's probably gonna stick around for a while. But I wanted to make a commentary on this topic because it's been sort of a growing argument amongst Montreal Canadiens fans, especially all over different parts of social media. You're seeing Twitter arguments, people going back and forth, Habs fans debating amongst themselves whom it is the Habs should trade. If they're in a spot to potentially improve the roster, maybe grab a second-line center, maybe use one of their young right-handed defensemen as bait to try to make that trade work and make it possible. Logan Mailloux' name has been tossed around there. But you have a lot of fans who happen to be fans of Mailloux and instead are proposing the idea of trading Reinbacher. Instead, if you go onto Twitter and you search Mailloux Reinbacher, you'll see a lot of folks going out there and debating which one is more prone or more appropriate to be moved. But this is why I wanted to dive into this post made on the RHabs subreddit by Synap6. The question is, how untouchable is David Reinbacher for you? I have to admit, I have not had much chance to see him play. However, people seem to be satisfied with his playstyle. The few games I did see, he was indeed present and smooth skating. It seemed impressive there. That said, if you're asked to flip Reinbacher in a trade or use him to entice another team, do you do it? I'm no scout, but I don't know if he'll pan out the way people hope. Selling on hype could be interesting, but how much do you think it could bite us in the back? Is he untouchable for you? Now, for Reinbacher, it's kind of difficult to give a fully fledged, guaranteed answer because he is young, 20 years old, 6'2", 194, right-handed defenseman drafted by the Habs in the 5th overall spot in 2023. He's pretty good. But he hasn't played much hockey over the past few years since being drafted. He had suffered an early injury in the preseason last year and only competed in 10 regular season Laval Rocket games. He had 5 points. In the playoffs, he had 6 points in 13 games, and then playing for Team Austria at different international tournaments, he also had some production over there. But David Reinbacher was supposed to be a smooth skating, shutdown D who had some offensive flair to his game, a big guy with some hybrid skills, kind of cut from the same cloth as a Moritz Seider. Now, I think Seider has a level of bite that Reinbacher may not be able to attain so far throughout his NHL career, but as more of that solid defensively, reliable, sturdy two-way brick wall of a D-man mold that Seider had back in 2019, Reinbacher was loosely supposed to follow in those footsteps. Now, of course, Canadiens fans will quickly chomp back at you and say, yeah, but look who else was available at 5th overall in 2023. You had Matvei Mishkov right there, and the Habs fumbled by not selecting him. And yeah, we've gone over that song and dance the entire time, so we're not going to continue hammering it down. But I will say this. David Reinbacher is one of only 3 top 10 picks from the 2023 draft to have not played an NHL game yet. The only other 2 are Danielson of the Wings and Silayev of the Utah Mammoth. But ultimately, David Reinbacher is in a really tough spot because the injuries have not allowed him to progress in the ways that we probably had hoped back in 2023. So the question as to whether or not he is untouchable and a Logan Mailloux is not, for example, could get folks going as to which one of these young defensemen do they value more. The problem is, Montreal, they do have some opportunities for guys to break onto their right side. But you can't really do that for everybody. You can't play both Mailloux and Reinbacher in the NHL next season. I don't think anybody is thinking that's a great idea just because they would be so inexperienced and you don't want 2/3 of your right side being NHL rookies. Alexandre Carrier is there. Lane Hutson can play on the right if you really wanted to force it. David Savard is gone, but then you still have some other guys like Xhekaj, Struble, Gouli, Matheson that could be available too. But the issue with trading David Reinbacher is, at least in my opinion here, his value is so low right now. Like, you look at Matvei Mishkov, you look at the other guys taken around him in 2023, and you're like, yeah, these guys are studs. Connor Bedard, generational talent, although you could definitely debate whether or not that's the case now. Okay, we're not going to get that discourse started, I'm sorry. Let's leave the generational label slapped onto Bedard for now. Matvei Mishkov, fantastic. Ryan Leonard in Washington, such a stud in the NCAA. Will Smith, awesome. Fantilli, awesome. Carlson, awesome. These guys are all really good players. So David Reinbacher is being swallowed up by the very competent and capable talent around him in the draft. And because he hasn't displayed that at the NHL level yet, or even the AHL, because he hasn't had a big sample yet, it becomes a really tough sell for another rival GM who's not really familiar with Reinbacher, or they're just checking in to see what he's been doing ever since getting drafted in 2023. Just looking at the numbers, it's not really impressive here. Although, I will say, the potential of a number one D-man, I think it still somewhat exists in David Reinbacher. He was drafted 5th overall, after all, but he's not going to be a number one D-man in the same way that Elaine Hudson is a number one D-man. Reinbacher is never going to score you 70 points in a season. He's never going to score you maybe even 60. If he gets you 40 in a year, you're probably really happy with that. Reinbacher's stability and his overall defensive reliability is his main asset. His tools involve being able to just disrupt the opposition, quickly break things back out, and do it all over again for an entire game. He is the Alex Pietrangelo-esque guy. He's never going to be a top point producer, but you need this kind of a player to win a Stanley Cup. The only issue is he had slower development because of his knee injury, and he didn't play much as a result. So when you think about the idea of trading him away, hey, this is probably the worst time to trade David Reinbacher, and if you are so believing that Logan Mailloux is that much ahead of Reinbacher that you would rather trade Reinbacher instead, yeah, like, sure, you're entitled to believe that, but I just disagree entirely. It's kind of interesting because on Twitter you will see quite a few guys going out there and talking about how Reinbacher might not be as skilled or physical as Mailloux, and maybe you should trade him more. Trade Reinbacher and a first to get a top center or something like that. Mason McTavish, whatever. Most of the folks on the subreddit, though, are all saying that they'd rather keep Reinbacher long-term and that he is an untouchable player. A top potential right-handed D for the long-term future on a team that probably needs more top right-handed D. Unless you're trading Reinbacher and a draft pick for a really good, bona fide center, not like a Kirby Dach experiment where he's young and you hope he becomes that top 6 center, but a guy who is already there, it's going to be really difficult to make that work. And so, I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How do you feel about the idea of a David Reinbacher trade? I think this comment on the RHAB subreddit by otherwise COD3478 pretty much encapsulates the majority of what I'm feeling here. There are a bunch of other comments, but I liked this one the most. Reinbacher isn't untouchable, but the Habs system make him practically untouchable. What I mean by that is 2 of our main weaknesses are right-handed defenseman and second-line center. Reinbacher being the only right D prospect with a high probability of being a top 4 means that he is the answer to one of the team's main weaknesses. Interesting how this user didn't put Mailloux there. Trading him for a winger, a lefty, or a goalie would make no sense. And I don't see a team trading a young, established top 4 right D for a prospect top 4 right D like Reinbacher. So that leaves the Canadiens with very little reasonable trade possibility. So he isn't untouchable, but the chance of any trade being worth it is extremely high. There are folks talking about the idea of packaging Reinbacher up for a Noah Dobson-like asset coming to Montreal, but we'll get into that a little bit later in today's show as to why that might not be the case anymore. So, Reinbacher, Mailloux, what are your thoughts on these young prospects potentially getting moved? I think Reinbacher is in a really difficult spot that has warranted trade discussion because Canadiens fans didn't really see too much out of him this previous year. That doesn't diminish the talent that exists in that frame, but it does make things a little bit more difficult to fully try to articulate when describing how good it is he is, or how good it is he could be. Which is why we're talking about trading him. Of course, right? What a rational way to go about it. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section either way. What are your thoughts on the idea of a Reinbacher trade, yay or nay? I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.